Dimp Digital presents Idle Game Chat.
Cool.
Hello, apps here from Dimp Digital. Welcome to Idle Game Chat. This is Dimp Digital's flagship video game podcast, where we take you through the ups and the downs of the video game world. We are here on your favourite podcast app and YouTube, absolutely free. However, if you want to support our grassroots independent endeavour, head over to patreon.com/Dimp Digital and join the community. #hand in pocket. On this edition, I'm joined once again by the reigning FGL Grand Prix winner. It's the resident referee. It's Logan. How's it going?
Yeah, good. Concerned that I'm about a third through my coffee already. We haven't even started. Well, we have technically now started, but up until that point, I was just looking at it thinking, is it going to last a distance, which is a concern?
It probably won't. Mine's normally gone quickly, but... You know, I just had a sip there as the intro was playing in, and it's not as hot as I anticipated. So the sort of 60 seconds I get to drink it at a decent temperature is ticking away, and that's that. This is only for video watchers, I guess, or listeners. I guess you're watching, aren't you? If you're watching on YouTube, although some people listen on YouTube, they have the app. They pay for YouTube Premium. They just listen as a podcast, which is fine. But if you are watching, I am showing Logan the size of this Grand Prix trophy that I finally got for him off of Parky. I mean, it's the blur, unfortunately, is sort of ruining the effect, so perhaps I shouldn't have done that. But that'll be coming his way very shortly. Took longer than I thought to get it. Parky's got his belt, so all the hardware's been handed out that needs to be. Actually, Adkins has not got his quiz shield.
That's sloppy from him.
I mean, he lives around the corner from me.
Yeah, but so do I, to be fair.
True, but I could, if needed to, I could walk to Adkins.
Yeah,
I could walk to yours in theory, but there's a death trap unless you cut through those lime fields, then you get mud on your shoe. So
you don't want to be walking down that non-pavemented bit of road that separates us.
It really annoys me that it's just not just something there. Like, it's 3/4 of that road has got a bit of pavement, and the last quarter of it,
the key bit as well, the bit round an S-bend where you really can't see and you want to be protected by some sort of pavement. It goes, nah.
And to be honest, I'm not sure you would be protected. The way people drive down that road, they'll be up and on that pavement if it gets put in, so you'll probably get run down anyway. But it's just
very true.
At least you can't. I would. This is the wrong thing to say, but if you're walking on the road where there's no pavement, you're about 40% at fault if something happens. I know that's not the law. By law, you're allowed to do it, but I think you're running an unnecessary risk, in my view, by doing that.
I always remember, like, when I used to get pissed up some nights or miss the bus, because, as you know, the bus is to and from, finish at 8 o'clock on a weekend or whatever. So you're bollocks. You have to get the train back and walk back. Yeah. And then the amount of times I walked down there, and I just have to get my phone and just either put on the LED or whatever or anything, just so that there's some sort of I'm here, because it is literally pitch black. It is an absolute death trap. But yeah, you're right. I do always still get worried. I've hit many an animal down there, but not. Yeah, I've run over a rabbit going down there before. I'm sure it was a rabbit. That weren't pleasant. No. And I've hit a cat as well.
That's the worst, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I nearly hit one. One did run out at me down that road. Luckily, it ran at a really random time. Like, there's another car coming the other way. And I was like, it's not really timed that well, but it got away with it. But literally 30 yards before that, there was a poor dead fox in the road. It had just been clowned into, so... Not good for wildlife either. And I must say, that particular route is avoidable. It's just much longer if you take the other way, which is completely safe.
Yeah. Like my luck, I'd do that. I'd go down the high street or something. Yeah. There you go.
And get taken out there. Anyway, local geographic and road issues for the small town. Well, actually, Southend's a city now.
It is a city.
There's lots of different
city status
villages and towns off that where we reside, where we can. Logan, I'm going to ask you this question and see if you've learned anything over these past few weeks. What is What is the undisputed best way to start a podcast?
Delay news.
Delay news.
The one that we haven't figured out yet, which is brought forward news.
Brought forward news. Doesn't quite roll off the tongue. McWomble, the bastard, hasn't come up with anything clever. I think he realised that as an impossible task.
Tricky, isn't it?
It is tricky, so maybe won't hold that against him. But yeah, it is delay news, and I don't know. It seems early to be delaying stuff into next year, is what I'd say. But transparency is always the best policy. Telltale Games has delayed The Wolf Among Us 2 until 2024. Announced last February and previously due to arrive this year, the game is now scheduled for release in 2024. Quote, we've made the difficult decision to delay The Wolf Among Us 2 out of 2023. We started work on this in 2020 and we're still determined to tell the ongoing story of Big B and the rest of the Fable Town gang. However, it is going to require more time. As disappointed as you are hearing this, we feel worse having to say it. Well, of course you feel worse because you ain't getting paid until that gets released, so that's more money in the hole, isn't it? Essentially, every day that ticks by, it's an extra bit of cash that has to be rolled out. We're committed to delivering the sequel fans deserve and doing what's right for the game while protecting the health of our team. So obviously got to get in that level of that it's for the team. We don't like teams being overworked and crunching and whatnot, which is fair enough. Games generally seem to take longer these days anyway. I mean, the release calendars show that, and that's due to complexity, but I do think there's more cognizant thoughts going into not working people to the bone and trying to kill them off. But the reason why this is relevant to us, as usual, is because it isn't a Grand Prix team. Mr. Salmon, unfortunately, will be looking to transfer that out if he's got any sense. Not for me to decide whether he should or shouldn't do that. But yeah, I mean, what do you think of this? Simply because we're in March, the opening week of March, and they're saying, well, it ain't coming this year, it'll come next year. It makes you wonder what was even occurring to start with. And, should they just kept their mouth shut, or was they just getting ahead of the game and saying, it ain't coming till next year? It gives them basically, I mean, that could give them almost 2 years if you think about it. At the end of 2024, they'd still be in target for that. So it's that's 18 months, isn't it? Give or take.
I was literally just thinking, right? Because obviously there was the whole palaver of what happened with Telltale sort of a number of years ago, back in 2018-19, wasn't it? And they basically binned it all off, if I'm right, and then someone bought them.
Yeah.
And I thought at that point, right, that's all dead.
Yeah.
I mean, I think to be honest, I don't know much around what they're doing, but I remember the last stuff I played of theirs, and I was like, we need to be sorting, this is aged now. This, they need to be bringing this forward a bit. And
you got the benefit of the doubt in 2012.
Yeah. But can you release that 10, 13, 14 years later?
No.
Can you get away with it? And I'm not sure you can. So I think I'm always a bit concerned that the Telltale, not the style, but that engine that they were running, I was kind of I don't want them just to build more stuff using that same old shitty engine. And I've just gone back and I was thinking, what have they actually done since 2018? And the answer's nothing. They finished off They finished off The Walking Dead. So if you remember, when it all went to pot, everyone was going, "Oh, but we're not going to get the ending." We'll finish it. We'll finish it. Don't worry about it.
Skybound came in and helped him, I think.
Yeah. So essentially, this is their kind of first new project under this new banner of LCG, who bought out Telltale. But everything else, it says Untitled Game of Thrones sequel, cancelled. Untitled Stranger Things game, cancelled. Untitled Project, cancelled. And then Wolf Among Us 2 was originally cancelled, restarted under LCG, and now that's been delayed. And you think, well, is this just going to be a false start for them? Because it's a bit of a concern.
I mean, Telltale, like you mentioned there, they basically went under, they were gone, and then they were kind of resurrected. Yeah. I'm not convinced this is Telltale of old anyway. I mean, it's just Telltale in name, essentially. I mean, I'm sure there's a few strands there in terms of personnel, but you think most of the people that were let go went and found other endeavours. Hopefully they all did. And what they had here maybe was a few people, or they bought access to contracts, or like The Wolf Among Us, licensing agreements, etc. So it's only the namesake, in my opinion. It will be interesting to see how this pans out. The trailer they showed off last year was more impressive than what they'd shown before, but trailers can easily be deceiving. And I think I've said this before, but I feel like the narrative-based Telltale games have kind of been lapped with the likes of, the Dark Pictures anthology, which aren't always great, fantastic games, but they bring graphical fidelity and things that Telltale just never had. The complaints were, this looks like turt, but you'll get away with it because the storytelling's good and the choices are fun. Whereas I think other studios have committed more budget towards it and come out with what would look like a much more modern game, whether it's The Quarry, whether it's like the Dark Pictures. We had Until Dawn way back in the day, which kind of started it off. Detroit Become Human is another that looks like if you just saw it being played, you go, cool, that's just a normal AAA game. And it actually has this choice and consequence underneath it. And then even what was that one we played I played on the Xbox that I reviewed recently, As Dusk Falls.
Yeah.
Now that was much more in the Telltale vein, where it looked lower budget, but all the guts and gubbins underneath it, where they would show you how the decisions were made and the flowcharts you had access to, and the actual genuine choice and consequence were exciting to see. So I'm hoping that they've been keeping an eye on what's going on. I'm not necessarily saying they need to bring out a game that looks like God of War and have the same level of choice, but I think that in failing to do that, the actual choice and consequence side needs to be more robust, because I think other games have come along and expanded upon that. And it'll be interesting to see. I mean, you hope that this is the start of them being able to kick on, but as you mentioned, with nothing coming out in 3-4 years, it's kind of like, well, someone's got to be paying for this, and at some point, someone who's writing the checks will go, all right, what's going on? Because I ain't had anything return on investment here.
Just to clarify, I've gone through this page again. It does say that apparently they released Batman Shadows Edition on December the 17th, 2019 on the Switch, the PS4, and the Xbox One. But I don't recall that at all.
No.
Do you?
No. I don't know if that was a re-release of a previous one. Because I feel like I've played all the Telltale stuff. And
there was Batman the Enemy Within.
Yeah, I remember that
Batman
one.
the Telltale series. It looks like a new release. 10 episodes, apparently. So I don't know what that did. Might be worth seeing. I might have got crapped on OpenCritic or something.
Well, most likely did.
But to be honest, I kind of feel like Telltale... I'm a bit concerned someone bought them and then just thinks it's okay just to continue those kind of original popular IPs under a similar engine and just chuck out extra story and they'll get clapped into... I just don't think that's the case anymore. I think what you said is other studios have moved it forward in that genre, and I don't think that's acceptable anymore. Yeah. And I don't think I think I was a bit done with that.
Oh yeah.
Like Telltale formula towards the end of the games that I played, and you kind of do just want a little bit more from it now.
Yes.
So I just wonder whether this new studio, I say new, I mean they've had them for like 4 or 5 years now. I just wonder whether they'll really do that and put the money in that it needs. Really, it needs rebuilding, I'd say, almost from the ground up.
That's what you'd hope for.
I just don't think that's going to happen.
No. Just to clarify, that Shadows edition was basically the 2 seasons of Batman roll into one with some enhancements.
Whoa. So, I mean, that is poor, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they're half decent, but they are those Telltale formula. But yeah, this is a chance at a fresh slate, so taking more time is probably better. It's just that you worry when a firm has been through so much turbulent activity just financially that it gets restarted with new, fresh investment, and you kind of think, well, probably want to get your first project out smoothly. That's not happened here. But, I mean, how many games actually come out on the timeline they're saying these days? It's probably less than 50% these days.
Yeah.
Ain't far off, is it? So to dig them out might be wrong, but it's just they've got a bit of a bad recent history just from the financial side of things, and you just hope that they get a chance to deliver this and it actually comes out to be pretty good. But salmon in the shit.
I mean, that was a bold one. I wouldn't have probably picked it, or definitely it wasn't in my list because it's just. I mean, I don't know, to be fair, how the others reviewed, but I think that was, even if it did come out this year, I'm not convinced it'd be a particularly great review anyway.
No.
But I think the last thing I would say is just never great when you get 2 months basically into the year and you're having to delay stuff.
Yeah.
You know, into next year already. It's not. It doesn't fill you with confidence, does it?
Nope. But who knows? Maybe it's probably the right thing to do, but whether it'll make a material difference, I don't know. FGL update. We've got some. Well, we actually had 2 games technically that are out. Lightfall, the Destiny 2 expansion, is out, but doesn't have a score.
Interesting.
So what I've read is some outlets are not going to do their full review until the raid drops, which I think is March the 10th. So this might be a case of where some stuff trickles through in the coming weeks, but the majority of people don't do it to the raid. So, yeah, there's nothing on OpenCritic yet. So probably the right thing to do with a game like this, where you want to evaluate all the content. Obviously, there was no early media access to this. I don't think that's necessarily reasonable, given the way the game's structured. It's kind of online service-based game, and I don't know how you'd unlock the raid for a pack of media to go out and not everyone else. Bungie don't need to anyway. They know that. They know quite literally. They just release this with no media, and it'll make them some money. So there's no problems for them. But Wo Long Fallen Dynasty has come out. Now, there was a bit of a trend. Well, not a trend, but we'd been calling out that Game Pass of these third parties get crapped on, it seems, when they come to be reviewed. Not for Wo Long, sitting on an 82. So, decent and not a disaster.
Dropped, though.
Has dropped. It was higher than that when the game first came out, so people are getting their teeth into it. And as per our new agreement, we're going to run through a few of the blurbs that Wo Long's got on the OpenCritic page. And once again, these are sorted by the most popular outlets, which we have no idea how that's done. And I'll pick the ones that are using a 10 or 100 point scoring system. I think we're only going to do 3 this week. I think last week we've done 4, and it seemed overindulgent. But there was 5 games, so maybe that skewed it slightly. But let's just do 3 and see how we go. The podium, if you will. So number 1, who's using the 100 point scoring scale, is PC Gamer. They're in it again. Lurking. Short and sweet. Technical issues aside, Wo Long is a master of its craft that future Souls-like should study under. 89 out of 100.
I mean, that's interesting because Elden Ring's being held up as the pinnacle of gaming these days. And then what you're saying is, well, actually, it should be looking to Wo Long, which is scoring worse.
It's a bit strange because Souls-like is basically the step down of Elden Ring, for example, which is the OG. And they're like, yeah, everyone's studied under that. Well, no, go to the source. But I kind of know what they're saying. They're like, don't copy From Software and the Souls-like, but if you're going to do something that uses those elements, Wo Long's maybe a decent formula.
Yeah.
89 out of 100 from Sam Greer. Decent. IGN, again, making the rounds. Mitchell Saltzman. What sort of name's that? Z as well. Familiar issues with storytelling and loot aside, Wo Long Fallen Dynasty is another great entry into Team Ninja's growing collection of action RPGs that features some of the best combat in the Souls-like genre, even though those battles start to lose their tension due to the distinct lack of enemy variety to fill out the 20-plus hour runtime. 8 out of 10. So that's interesting that it's 20 plus hours. So for me, probably 30 hours. But sometimes these games are in the 50s to 70 hour range. That's more palatable.
Concerning, though, that he's getting bored of it.
True.
And it's actually, he's saying, enemies get a bit boring. Well, yeah, you'd be lucky you're only been doing it for 20 odd hours because, as you say, for me and you, if we picked it up, it'd probably be double that.
No, exactly. So Mitchell's
sick of it.
He got sick of it towards the end because those enemy. I don't know. It's a tough ask, isn't it, to ask for games to have unique stuff throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Generally, people. To be honest, in those games, I'd get annoyed if I was still struggling at the 20th hour. I want to be beating the scrubs at that point. And
you
just
want to have
dominating.
mastered it, didn't you? I feel like you've started off and actually got somewhere with
I don't
it.
want Hi-Fi Rush chucking new shit on top of me into the last second that I've got to adapt to. I don't want challenge.
You want to master your craft.
I want to play.
Get to the end.
I want the game to be played for me. I don't want to die
An
once.
interactive film.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway, Game Informer's next. Elijah Gonzalez. But even as its second half failed to match what came earlier, so again, maybe a bit of a trend of the, it losing its vigour towards the end. Wolong Fallen Dynasty has finally honed delight. Its action is precise and responsive, and learning the intricacies of each adversary is exceedingly fulfilling. While I wish its back stretch was either pared down or had a wider variety of foes, this is a rare title that induces trance-like focus and euphoric moments of victory. It may not quite reach the heights of the works that inspired it, but it's not far off. 8.8 out of 10. Pretty positive, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like just loses a little bit at the end, but overall pretty good. And I suppose that's what, pushes it down from those sort of 90s, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that's ultimately it. And some things I think some things get caught in some weird, unconscious, shared mind, hive mind in the game industry that gets to the 90s, like just gets dragged into there by some weird market employer. But I look at something like Deathloop and I think that was like 89. I'm like, wow, what? I mean, it's good, but you're talking like people going, that's the game to build a platform off. Everyone should be looking at this. And I was like, what are you talking about? Bloody hell. But Wolong sits on an 82, a decent FGL score, and one that, to be honest, I have been hearing good things about it. And I'm like, well, you know what? I'll add it to the menu. The menu is getting big. The menu's always big. I'd like to have a big fucking list to support off. Maybe one day I'll go through what the menu is. It may be a topic situation where that's relevant, especially when it comes to how many games potentially we play at once. But I know the answer to this, but I have to ask it just so that the record's kept. It's on Game Pass. So could Logan just one day think, you know what? Let's see what this fucking Souls-like genre is all about. Samurai, Chinese historical enemies, probably hard as nails. You could bung it on for 2 hours and go, good lord, and then get out of there.
You know what? I always feel like I should just see whether... Because I don't know where I sit on the scale, ability-wise. Like, it's not saying I've really ever dipped my toe into it. I've always just ruled it out as something that I don't have the... I wouldn't say mental capacity because that makes me sound like an idiot, but basically the patience for and the desire, like things like that, I'd be like, it's shit, it's too hard, rule it out. When actually, it's my lack of patience in trying to master the system.
Yeah.
And like in Hi-Fi Rush, where it's kind of like, rather than playing the game to how it wants me to, I've just gone, well, I'll just spam the shit out of it. And these games will largely punish that.
Yeah.
So there's a question for me whether I should just turn something on like this and just go, we should just put this to bed. So I'm not ruling it out. If there's nothing on the menu that's instantly grapping me, I could easily go, right, let's see what's going on here for an hour or two. But I would highly doubt whether this is the sort of thing I could see through from start to finish.
The 20-hour plus runtime might be a bit too rich for your blood. What I've heard is that it's easier than it's easier than their past games like Neo. It's easier than a lot of the Soulsborne games from Software. However, the first boss that you encounter is probably one of the hardest. So it's almost like a rite of passage. You can get past that bastard, you're actually standing pretty good stead to get through the rest of it, because after that it unlocks online co-op. I mean, you can summon a randomer in who, for some reason, when you summon someone in these Souls games, they're like millions of power levels above anything, and they can really help. They can really help wipe your ass. Yeah. That's what they love doing. They go and help people, but also it gives you little AI companions that you can invoke the services of, and they come along and just take the pressure off you. Out. Yeah, because they even just aggroing a big enemy for a little while whilst you get out of there and go, right, I need to fucking heal, can be a lifesaver in these games. So I don't think that's a lie. There will be people that have gone through the game and not died in the first boss and found that easy. But I think most people, it's generally a cycle you go through. Initially, you get humbled by the game early by just the stock enemies. Then you realise how to beat them. Then you face your first big boss, and that humbles you again. And it's all about how much appetite you've got to overcome that and continue. But a lot of people will play this and get a few hours in and go, nah, can't be dealing with that stress, which is fair enough. But Wolong Fallen Dynasty doing well with an 82 and starts to reverse the momentum of what Atomic Heart started with its low to mid 70s on that Game Pass third party side of things. Good to see, and good for people out there who just want to try a Souls-like game. This sounds like one, if you've been a bit put off by the brutality of the others, this is one to try, and then you'll probably know for sure where your level is, but you could at least have dipped your toes in and just gone, yep, I understand what we're doing there. Now, transfer window's open in the FGL.
Yeah.
I forgot to tell everyone, but I think they should know anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I was. I was like, he hasn't said anything, so I've got a leg up here. And I was like, I'll consult my group.
That's what set me off. I was like, oh shit, I'll just, without courtesy, I'll post a message saying, by the way, the transfer window's open.
But you're right, you shouldn't have to wire passes.
No, I shouldn't have to. We've had a couple of transfers. Hall in the Grand Prix has got rid of Kerbal Space Program 2, which is in early access.
Probably the right decision.
Probably, yeah. I mean, those early access things are... it's a fool's errand to have it in the team because ultimately the game's not finished. If enough people put review scores in and say, well, at the moment it's a 6 out of 10 because it's not finished, it don't matter. That'll be the score that you'll end up getting. So once the score is official on the page, you can't transfer it out. So I think Hall noticed that A, it was going to early access, B, that the opinions weren't great. Even if in 2 years when it finally hits 1.0, it's the best game ever, they don't matter for shit in 2023 for Hall. So he's got rid of that. And then he transferred in Tempest Rising, which wasn't on any radar for me. It's an RTS game. And I don't know. We'll see how that pans out. In the Grand Prix, you've got to sometimes think outside the box because there's 60 unique games lurking. So that's one that no one else had anywhere lurking. So he's done that, and we'll see how that pans out. And I guess more prominently for you, you've blinked. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, after its in-depth state of play showing, has been kicked out of the team at a 5-point penalty. Yeah. And you've gone to trusty Nintendo, gone to the Nintendo well with Pikmin 4. Talk us through the logic here.
I mean, I think, we touched on it last week when we went through the state of play piece, and I think realistically the score for that game is going to be somewhere between 6 and 7s. So we're looking at a range of between 65, I think, to 75 for that game. In all likelihood, I think it will probably land on like 72, something like that. So that's what I envisage for it. Could be well wrong on that. Like, for some reason, it could be a lot better than I thought. But I was like, it don't look great to me. Is that a bit of negative attention, should I say? I don't think everyone's that enthused about it and everyone's a little bit down on it. So I think that'll play into people's minds as well. And I just don't think it's going to review that well.
It's already been written off, isn't it? I talk about the Hive Mind. The Hive Mind's decided this ain't what anyone wanted from Rocksteady. This ain't what anyone wanted from DC Universe. And this, I don't want fucking King Shark with a minigun, allegedly.
I mean,
Lee Quinn had a minigun. I watched it back. She had a minigun. What on earth?
The whole thing just seems a bit bizarre to me. So I think when we went through it originally, I was like, we'll have to see what that one does. And I think we've seen what it does, and it makes sense to make a reasonably early decision on it and take the 5-point penalty and move on with your life. And I think something like Pikmin was in mid-80s in Pikmin 3. If it comes out around the same sort of ballpark, if it comes out, gets like an 85, you take the 5-point penalty and you get an 80. So in my books, I might be somewhere around a 10-point mark, 10 points up doing that. But that's the calculated gamble you take. Yeah. It could all go pear-shaped. Who knows?
Indeed, it could do. So what that does for the championship showdown between you and Parky is you're sitting on 249 points now with 3 games out. Parky's got 2 games out. He's got 161 points. So he's only 88 points off the mark now. He was in the 90s off. And that's for me, striking range to get back on level terms and go back into the lead. Now, the only thing that will concern Park is your average is still solid at 85 and his is at 81. So there is momentum on your side there. And it'd be interesting to see how the coming months kind of treat you, because you've got Star Wars Jedi Survivor coming in April, Resident Evil 4 coming later this month. I think Pikmin, when's Pikmin due? Is it May or April? I've got something in my head, but
it's pretty soon. Yeah, it's not far off.
Not far away at all. And then on Parky's side, I'm just trying to see when the next sort of official game that he's announced is coming out. Probably Destiny 2 Lightfall will be his next one. And after that, probably Diablo.
I'm pretty sure there's some on his list when I was looking at that he'll probably be wanting to sub out. I don't know, actually, when I look at it.
Cool. Pikmin 4, July 2023.
Yeah.
But you didn't have the luxury of waiting another transfer window to get rid of Suicide Squad because it came out in May. Well, it's due for May, so it had to go now, otherwise it was there, and you sat there dealing with it.
It could do better, but I mean, I think tops it's getting high 70s, like absolute tops, and I'd still be shocked if it gets that. So it made sense to sort of make a gamble on that one.
No,
but I think for this tranny window, unless some other news comes up, it will be consistency.
Yeah, that's what's required. In the Grand Prix, Biff is still in the lead, 6 games out, average of 77, 459 points. Salmon in second, 5 games out, average of 80, 399 points. So he's only 60 points off Biff, so that shows where Biff's pretty low average is starting to catch up with him. Paper in third with 3 games, 79 average, 238 points. Adcock with 2 games and an 81 average, 161. Hall with 1 game, 81 average, 76 points. He's obviously made a transfer, so that's where the -5 comes into play. Adkins still not off the mark, biding his time, seeing what happens. But that is the updates for the FGL. Quick bit of housekeeping from last week. We spoke about Baldur's Gate 3 not coming to Xbox. And the speculation was that Jim had wrote a check out and said, that ain't going there. Well, the developers have come out and said, no, that's not the case at all. I
did see that.
There is no exclusivity deal there, so I think it's important to note that. What they have said is they're planning to do it on, or they want to do it onto Xbox, but they're running into technical issues preventing them from, well, potentially preventing them doing it day and date. And it seems to be around the split screen co-op, which, you know, is a bit of a surprise. I mean, Phil came out and promised that Xbox Series X, the most powerful console in the world. So something ain't right, and obviously the rumour mill goes running round and says, well, it's that Series S, in it. If it can't get to it, because they've got a feature parity, and if it can't get running on that, then it ain't going to be going out with, oh, you can only play split screen on the Series X. Now, they've pretty much denied that, but I don't know. It seems a bit... This is almost similar to Halo Infinite. That was supposed to have split screen co-op. Guess what? Got canned. So I don't know whether the Xbox architecture doesn't play nice with split screen co-op in general, which prevents them from doing this. But there's a couple of cases there where that's become a bit of an issue. Anyway,
it might not be that S. It really annoys me they've hamstrung themselves with that. Like, there was no need for it, in my view. It was an unnecessary console to get out.
Yeah, it's... I don't know. I try it these days, rather than overcomplicate my mind, is just sort of subscribe to Occam's razor. Like, what's the most logical... Like, what's the obvious thing? And you would say, well, they've got to build it for Series S, which may be hamstringing them.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's fine to subscribe to that, and I think that's a reasonable thing to say, even if that's not the official line. Again, I would argue, and I think I said this before, no developer in their right mind is going to come out and say, it's that Series S.
No.
They're just simply not going to burn a bridge like that.
No.
If it's not that, then there's surely points to perhaps another issue with the Xbox, or you go, look, Larian, developers, you ain't up to snuff, are you, clearly? So you either blame them, or you blame the Series S, or you blame the Xbox Series architecture and say, what's going on here? But I don't think it's unfair to suggest that the Series S might be causing a bit of problems here, because again, they're simply not going to allow them to release a game that has split screen on one platform and not the other. It has to have feature parity, is what I'm told by those in the know. It can run at a slower frame rate. It can run at 1 frame per second potentially, like Cyberpunk basically did. But it's got to have the features in there.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, it's not Jim writing a check out. And
that's what matters.
Well,
no money's being handed over, allegedly.
No. Well, here's the thing on that. Whose fault is it if Jim wrote a check out and said, I want that on PlayStation only for a period of time or forever? He goes, look, I'm buying that. Because a lot of people say, oh, Jim, you evil cunt. I go, what a horrible bastard for doing that. My view is, you go, Phil, what are you fucking letting that slide for? Get in there and fucking fight for it. And it works the other way round. Anytime there's any term of exclusivity, I blame the other platform for not coming up with a business proposal that makes sense to have it on there as well. And I know that because they both do it. This is the thing. They're both at it, as Graham would say. They're always at it, doing what they can to try and make their platform more appealing than the other. So if one platform decides, well, we're going to pay for that, and the other one doesn't, tough bollocks, isn't it? That's kind of the way it works. And we all go, well, competition's good. And it go, well, it is. But this is a symptom of competition, is that they always want to get ahead of the other one, which means they're going to do what they can to make their platform the most appealing. And I say, look, that's not Sony's fault. That's not Microsoft's fault when they do it. It's the other platform for not getting their nose in front. And that's what it's all about. But if you're going to sit in one ecosystem, you're going to have to make concessions, because competition doesn't mean everything comes to everyone. In fact, it means probably less games do, because there needs to be a uniqueness between the products.
Yeah, no, that's completely accurate. And the way around it is just to own the lot and just sit here and just pay what you want then.
Yep.
But not everyone's got the means or the desire to do that, and I understand it.
Yeah, I think on balance, it's not really worth it, is my view.
It's not, 100% it's not. It's a complete waste. I mean, I've basically bought my PlayStation to play God of War Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Right, and the other few bits, but it is a waste, but...
For most normal people, it's not worth having it all, so I get it. But if you're going to go down the route of just one, this is what happens. And you'll get a few wins. You know, Phil will get his exclusivity hooks in, and you'll be laughing. The same way, Sony will get a few wins as well. It's just that's just the nature of the beast. But I say don't blame the man that's paying for the money, because they're all at it, as we know. There's exclusivity on Microsoft's platforms, and there's exclusivity on Sony. Yeah. Take aim at the person who's running your platform. Say, you do better for us. Don't worry about what the others are doing. These are not poor companies that they're being backed by.
No, they're not.
Sony's multi-billion, and Microsoft's 2 trillion.
Yeah, but Sony sits there going, we're just a little... You ain't. Pack that in. They're the worst for it, claiming paupers. And you go, well, yeah, like comparatively to Microsoft, overall you are, but you got them Walkmans right, so you're in the money.
Got that Blu-ray right.
Got the Blu-ray right.
You know, they get paid for every Blu-ray that's released.
What?
I think.
You're joking.
No, I think they get a rip on every disc that's... I mean, it's less relevant now, actually. So they definitely had a term where they were like, yep, champions. So I don't know if you remember, going back to the PS3 and Xbox 360, the PS3, one of the big things was it's a Blu-ray player as well. And everyone was like, oh, wow, new fantastic ways of watching films, etc. The picture's excellent. On the Xbox 360, you could buy a HD DVD drive and put that in, which was at the time that was like the equivalent. It was like the battle between Blu-ray and HD DVD, and obviously the HD DVD died a death, and that was the end of it. But Blu-ray is a Sony made thing. I think they get paid on every disc, or at least they did.
Yeah,
at one
there's
point.
still people that just want all those things, though. So there'll still be a significant amount of people buying them, even though more people are moving to like UHD streaming and stuff.
Yeah, I think they make like 25p or something. But
yeah, I mean it's still free money.
It is free money.
Money for nothing, isn't it?
And just to tie us back to the gaming, that's what Call of Duty will be if and when Microsoft own them and people buy it on PlayStation, it'd be, well, that's free money.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And then Jim will be sitting there going, well, that's not how we're playing this. But there you go. You know what? I want to call it there.
Done.
Call it there. We've got a Pentiment discussion coming up. More Game Pass being wheeled out. So Logan and I sat down and played that, which I think ended up being the only game they released last year. Which, as we know, wasn't. We know 2022 is a bit of a doldrums for that, from that perspective. But Pentiment did make out the door. Grounded did as well, but that had been in early access for a year. So I think it was those two. But anyway, Pentiment, story-based, historical, unique game, if nothing else. And Logan and I sit there and discuss our experience with that. But for this particular segment of Idle Game Chat, we're going to put a pin in it. So we will see you on the other side. Here we are then, back with some game chat to close out this edition of Idle Game Chat. This time it's Pentiment, and I'm joined by the FGL Grand Prix winner of 2022, Resident Ref Logan, back in action. Playing games again, seemingly.
I go through lulls, don't I? Where stuff won't get played and I'll just play rock games. And then I'll go for a phase of actually playing some games so we can talk about them.
Yeah, it's always welcome here. Pentiment released in November of 2022, developed by Obsidian Entertainment and published by Xbox Game Studios. So one of Big Phil's stable, chucking out games. One of, I think we counted 2 last year, Grounded and Pentiment, both coming from Obsidian. So we all know the story from 2022. I have to ask the question, because we know that this game basically won you the FGL Grand Prix last year.
Yeah.
Is that the only reason this has even got a sniff? Because you felt like you owed the game some sort of attention? Or was there genuinely something there that you thought, well, I've seen the trailers, I've had a little read of it, this might be worth diving into?
I mean, I guess what piqued my interest was the fact that it did better. It reviewed better than I thought it was going to.
Yeah.
So I expected it to be, well, I was anticipating it being mid-70s or something like that. But I think we discussed 1,000,001 times beforehand, and I'm pretty sure the phrase we used was, you never know with these art house tutters.
No.
So I think, when it came out, and I'm pretty sure it got me about an 85 or an 86, right?
Yeah.
It scored really highly. So I was like, I know it was an artsy kind of medieval style game that it revolved around a murder. And I kind of, as I looked more into it, I was like, it looks like a bit of a murder mystery, sort of text-based game. And I was like, do you know what? I'll give it a go and see if it piques my interest. Again, this is a great thing about things that come onto Game Pass. You can just jump in an hour or so and see how things go. And if it's really not gelling, it's sort of like no harm, no foul.
Yeah. No, it does definitely lend itself to that and gives games like Pentiment an opportunity, and probably more recently something like Hi-Fi Rush, to thrive a little bit in...
he's got dated it.
Well, we know Hi-Fi Rush is out. People are playing it. Hopefully, I've played through it. There's people loving that game. That is scoring very highly.
Yeah.
Another 10 out of 10 from IGN. Pentiment and Hi-Fi Rush. I mean, somewhat absurd in some aspects, but needless to say, performing very well. Fair to say, then, that Obsidian Entertainment wasn't the draw here. Like, have you played any of their old games, like Fallout New Vegas or... The Outer Worlds, which was one that I enjoyed, Grounded, which has come out. This is not really a studio necessarily follow.
No, I can't. I have to be honest. I don't particularly feel like I follow studios because there's some studios that kind of stay in lane, but there's also a number that kind of jump around.
Yeah.
And I don't tend to sort of jump into horrors or thriller games or anything like that. So I stay in my lane of games, and then if the developers and things come into my lanes, then it gets a sniff, basically.
Yeah, that's a good way of doing it. Then you can't really end up playing something you wasn't expecting. South Park: The Stick of Truth.
Again, I don't. No, well, I've never been a huge South Park fan.
No.
Like, I appreciate it when it's on, but I can't say I've sat there, watched all the series, and I'm sort of a massive fan of it. So again, that was a game that I was kind of like, I think it's like turn-based combat on that as well. So I was like, get out.
Yeah, there is turn-based combat in the Stick of Truth. Very well received also. I mean, Obsidian have been pumping out some really well-received games, so it's kind of no surprise that this would turn up and do well.
Well, it's why I picked it, just for context, in the Gaming League. Obsidian have got a pretty good back catalogue and track record, and that's another reason why I thought it could do better than I perhaps expected, was because of that. So I didn't play this game because of the developer, but I did pick it partly, mostly really, I guess, really, because to do with Obsidian. Yeah,
that's important to note, because often we will crap on a game, say, cool, those review scores down at 78, that's not really good for the FGL, which isn't a great score for the Fantasy Gaming League, but in general it's probably still worth playing if you're interested in the game and the genre. So sometimes I don't think we always necessarily state that when we're looking through the lens of a competitive scoring. 78 is not great, but that's probably worth a game playing one day.
100%, yeah. I mean, it's nearly an 8 out of 10, basically.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
You know, and that, if you said something was an 8 out of 10, you'd go, well, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, Pentiment. So I've gone to the store page here because I think it gives us a little bit of context. Well, does it? I don't know. I glanced through it and thought, I'm not really sure if this is what's on offer, but here's what they've decided to pump into that store page. Art imitates death. Step into a living, illustrated world inspired by illuminated manuscripts and printed woodcuts in a time when Europe is at a crossroads of great religious and political change. Walk in the footsteps of Andreas Moller, a master artist who finds himself in the middle of murders, scandals, and intrigue in the Bavarian Alps. Illustrated world. Experience 16th century Europe as the master artist of the time saw them. Art inspired by great illuminated manuscripts and the earliest printed books becoming living, breathing world in Pentiment. Uncover mysteries. Choose different academic and social backgrounds and meet a colourful cast of characters as you discover the stories and secrets that lie within the small Bavarian town of Tassing, nearby the fucking abbey. I can never pronounce what that abbey's called. It's like Keirarsau. Kirso, because there's no voice acting in this. Well, there is, but it's very few and far between. I never got the soundboard. Impact a changing world. In an era of religious and political change, each decision you make can have a profound impact on the community's future. Find your own way through this turbulent time and see the consequences of your choice play out over generations. It's quite interesting what they choose to put in there and not put in there, because this is, for those that don't know, it's highly pinned on its narrative and the outcomes that you as the player will get. So it's interesting to see what they kind of drop in there as little sort of teasers, mention that there's murders, lurking scandals, and they mention Andreas in there, but actually a lot of the change, as it says in there, will be towards the community that you find yourself in, which is Tassing. Now, I have to say, Logan, having played through this, this is not a Biff game. So we say that and use that as this is not what you'd traditionally he would even consider playing, nor would he spend more than 50 minutes in before he got bored, because he likes AAA first person shooting, which is nothing wrong of. But I'm also equally shocked, given the runtime it took me to get through this, 22 hours and change, that you saw this through, because you have no qualms with dropping things if they're not sticking. And this in particular, it feels completely and utterly outside of a typical Logan wheelhouse. So to see that through to completion is either one or two things. One, that Steve's got, he's decided I'm not budging on this. Yeah, and thought I'm going to finish this. Or there was genuine enjoyment throughout the process, because I definitely had peaks and definite lulls, like long lulls. I was like, I'm getting a little bit bored here. But what do you say to that comment?
Yeah, so I think the game did just about enough at times to not make me put it down. I'm fine largely there's no stress. Like sometimes I like to play games where there's like no stress.
Can't
involved.
fail.
Like,
there's no retrying.
Yeah, I'm just basically going through the motions at some points. But you do find yourself doing that with this game. There's some good bits that happen, and they happen just enough at the intervals where you're just about to go, getting a little bit. I'm on the edge here. I don't know whether that's intentional or not, but it did do just enough just to keep me in the loop. And I think there was at times a bit like, well, I want to see this story through. I actually want to get to the end of it, because it's kind of like it's almost in some ways, I wouldn't liken it to like a film or a series, but you put up with in a series, you go, those 2 episodes were rubbish back to back. But you go, I want to see what the season. I want to get to the end of that series. You kind of just go through the motions on those episodes and take them for what they are to get to the end of the story. And I think sometimes through Pentiment, I was a bit like that.
Yeah. I mean, my outlook's always a bit different. If I start something, unless it's impossibly hard, doesn't matter how much I'm kind of not enjoying it, seemingly, I will finish it. Because there's a certain satisfaction just getting to the end of something and going, fuck you. Now I can put you down and slag you off without the fear of, sounding like a hypocrite who didn't get through it all. So I was always going to finish it regardless. And like you said, it's not very taxing because there's no fail states, not that I ran into anyway. And it's all in your own hands. You can kind of do it at your own pace to a certain extent. There's no real-time clock running, although there is an element of time shifting throughout the days, which I found interesting. They didn't really signpost particularly well until after I'd done it a few times. I was like, I'm losing.
Go and break bread with so-and-so.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm doing that. And I realised I'm losing half the day doing that. And I was like, I've got to make these meaningful. But we'll get into that. See, I was always going to play through it, and obviously being a story-based game usually is in my wheelhouse. But there was definite periods, like long periods throughout that 22 hours where I was like, I'm really just not engaged with this. And like you said, it would throw out that little hook and that bait occasionally, a handful of times throughout the game, which would you sort of be pulled back in. But then also, it's very pedestrian.
Yeah.
I don't know if mundane's a bit harsh. Sounds negative, but it's very pedestrian. You're essentially wandering around the town in a 2D sort of art book style. I mean, they're talking about manuscripts and woodcut. I mean, I've never seen a woodcut, and I don't know what they're talking about with that, but manuscripts, I can kind of get my head around where they're going with the art style and whatnot. But it just didn't always engage me, and there's probably several reasons for that, which we will get into. In terms of the narrative, overall, was you satisfied with that journey and outcome, or at the end was you a bit like,
So I kind of took the story for what it was, but I definitely feel like they could have done a bit more with it. It's a tricky balance, right, between it being EastEnders and it being kind of realistic and stuff, and things being obvious. And it's a really tricky balance, but I did feel a little bit unfulfilled by the story as a whole. In some places there were some sort of interesting elements to it, but I don't, without giving too much away, I wanted a bit more from it in terms of how it was pulling me through, and not just in the big moments, but sometimes I was a bit ambivalent towards certain characters, and I think there's, one of my biggest problems there are so many characters and families and things. You struggle to sort of build relationships, meaningful relationships, and sort of likes, dislikes with people. And because the story doesn't pique you as much, you kind of just find yourself going through the motions and sort of, there's some points where I was just sitting there just mashing A little bit to get through the pointless conversation. And I think that's where I'd expected a bit more from a game like this, is to build out the characters with some of the less sort of meaningful characters. Also, there was one character in there that's a bit more jovial or whatever that provided me. I always thought, I see what this fella's got to say, normally some sort of gem, but most of the time I sort of got to a point where I was like, I don't even really want to have to go and speak to this person, because it's going to be more time absorbed with pointless chit chat.
Yeah. The way the game's kind of set up is that it's split into 3 parts for people, very distinct parts of the game, much like an old, I guess, play might be split up, or a movie script may have those sort of elements in there to make it acts. Yeah, it is acts. Sorry, they use the word acts, not parts. What am I talking about? And the opening sort of part, there is a murder that act. The opening act, there is a murder that. I know. I'm normally quite good at using the word act, but it's gone today. The opening act is a murder that takes place in the town, and whilst you're not explicitly given the instruction to solve it, you're given a good reason to investigate and try and find who the perpetrator is.
Yeah.
And what I found, and that's that sort of setup where you're kind of left to go and do something for a set amount of days, is a common kind of setup in the game. They reuse it time and time again, using different scenarios. And what I found was, because particularly when you're investigating a murder, it was a murder, it's not potentially, he's got a fucking knife in his back, so that ain't anything else, is it? And you want to, or at least I wanted to, make sure no stone was left unturned. Now the game doesn't actually let you do that, and we'll get into why it does that, and I think that's actually one of the more interesting things. You do have to make decisions. However, consistently I found myself looping round the town just in case. Well, it's moved a day on. Has something changed here? Has the fucking baker got something to say interestingly now? No, same as yesterday. I found that frustrating because I was almost like, I don't want to miss something key here that's going to cost me later on down the line. And I was being overly thorough for the game, I think. But because it sets you on that path to be thorough, and you're essentially investigating a very important crime that's taking place, it felt like that was the right thing to do. The game
ups the stakes, right?
Yeah.
It basically puts the stakes up here. So because the stakes are high, you don't want to be blasé about it. You think, I need to speak to all the people, I need to understand what's going on, what all the relationships are, and do all that kind of back work. But I think realistically only lets you do 20%, 25% of what you could do. So you know that automatically you've left 75% of it to chance.
Yeah, and that's that was always. I don't mind that decision, that kind of conscious decision I had to make, because the way the game is set up is that you wander around. It's 2D, as we said. You speak to people, and it's all drawn out as though it's a book. So when you speak to someone, a little speech bubble comes up, and you can hear the scribbling, as though they're writing out the speech. You can skip through it and just read it as it comes out. I mean, we had a discussion about the fonts when we first started, saying they need to be changed. I think your advice is to put it on the simple font. I actually left it on the original fonts, and it's difficult. And the reason why they do that is each sort of character, depending on their academic understanding, will have a different font, which is quite an interesting way to kind of present class and not necessarily intelligence, but writing acumen. I thought that was interesting. And the simple fonts still do that, but they're not as exaggerated.
They're actually fucking legible.
They are legible,
basically, because otherwise you're dealing with Gothic style fonts, which are just like, it's hard enough to just figure out what's going on, and the whole thing, as you say, is reading. Yeah, and it's just like, makes it a million times more difficult if you can't understand, or you're having to decipher what's being written at first before you sort of can do anything else. Yeah, I won't criticise the game too much for that, because the option to put it in simplified fonts is there. But they know, though. That's what annoys me. They know. If they're giving you the option, they've obviously gone through. Stick to the creative vision, but also give people what they need. Otherwise, it'll get dinged. So clearly, that's why it's there. So you'll speak to someone and have a little scribble. It'll tell you what to say, and then you can interact with them with dialogue options. Occasionally when you speak to someone, it'll do that classic thing that games, I feel like, just appeared when The Walking Dead started from Telltale, where it's like, oh, so and so will remember that, and you're like, oh, what have I done here? Big gong goes dong. You're like, oh, what have I done here? And then what that might entail is later on during that conversation, or even later on in the actual game, you may return to that person and want a bit of the truth, or the scoop maybe, or information that might be pertinent to your investigation. And depending on the sort of questions that you
or the responses you gave, sorry, it will skill check you in a way that's quite interesting. It will bring up, the 4 sort of responses that you gave, and either have like a blue arrow up, a red arrow down, or multiples of blue or red, showing that this response was a positive response to that character, and therefore if you get enough blue, you'll meet the skill check and they'll be able to reveal the information to you that you're after. And obviously if you chose responses that the character didn't appreciate or didn't think was good, you'll fail the skill check and you won't get any more information out of them. So I liked all that. However, there is a lot of that, and there's a lot of wandering around chatting, which is fine until we get to the stage where they say, right, if you're doing specific activities, it will move time on. So essentially the day's split up into, I don't know, like 4 or 5 different times that you can wander around in. 2 of them you seemingly have to have food at. So you have to go and find someone to go and have lunch and dinner with, I think it is. I don't know what whether that's exactly true. But that will move time on as well. And then soon, after it took me about a day to realise how the structure worked. I was surprised it wasn't saying, right, here's specifically what will happen when you do these activities. Time will move on, opportunities will disappear, and you'll have to just go with what you've got at the end of this deadline you've been given. And that was interesting, and I like the fact that you can't do everything, but it also went against my instinct to try and find everything. And I was kind of in this weird loop of wandering around too much, doing stuff that actually was offering no value to me. Like, you can almost, I think, in hindsight, follow the investigation clues that it puts on your little map and get most of what you need. How did you approach it?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, you sort of go through it and you start it thinking, all right, I need to leave no stone unturned. And to be fair, throughout the majority of the game, as you unlock new areas and things, I still found myself at times thinking, oh, I haven't spoken to that person. I've been up there for a while, see what's going on. There's nothing going on. So I kind of, there's some houses where if there's nothing going on, it will like block out the door, but there's others that will let you in and talk to them. Yeah, and it's like, if there's nothing going on here, just like
lock out.
It.
Yeah,
just don't let me waste my time. But it seems to encourage you to do that, and I did find it difficult to break that loop. But as I got further through the game, I wouldn't say I was breaknecking it, but I found myself becoming a bit more liberal with. I kind of sussed the game out. I was like, look, I've pretty much sussed you out now that what I get from all these ancillary conversations are not really adding much. So
no.
I'll just leave it, and unless I have to go up there, I won't.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had the same experience towards the latter half. I was like, okay. There were occasions I still would go wandering around doing a loop, just in case, and never found anything.
Sometimes though, I found myself a bit stuck because I don't really know where I'm supposed to be going to move the game forward. So there would be times when I used to explore just to figure out what the trigger point of the next, because I didn't feel like that was always overly clear, like what the trigger point was. So I found myself going around chatting to everyone, and at some point you would go, yep, that was a bit that was a conversation I needed to have, or whatever it was. So I don't know, it might have just been me just not paying full attention or something at some point, but I did find myself getting snarled up.
Oh yeah, I definitely my mind would wander playing the game quite a bit. Because it doesn't hold you and grip you. It's not gripping from start to finish at all. You can easily find yourself being distracted. Yeah. Because for me at least, it didn't have my attention all the time. And make it clear that there is obviously a time limit on when you want to complete your investigation. You're given a deadline, but it's not real time. No time passes if you just stood there for 20 hours and left the game on pause. The game wouldn't tick on. You have to conduct certain events to move to the next phase of the day, whether it's the afternoon, the evening, night, etc. So it might be having dinner with someone, it might be going off on an activity with someone. That will pass the time. So because I knew there was some time element to it, and I was a bit like, am I going to have to sprint around and worry about actual real time? But you don't. It's completely in your hands to do that. And they do warn you and say, they do warn you, they say doing this will take some time. Are you sure? It'll never I don't think it might have happened once towards the back end where it's not as important, but usually it will say, "Are you sure?" So oh, actually, maybe I should just go and speak to Andrew up the road quickly whilst I'm here, just in case, which I appreciated. Mentioned in the store page that you play as Andreas Mauler. I think another one of my... I kind of understand why they did this, because creating a blank slate is harder to write for. If you think about, all the permutations with that.
Yeah.
But you are chucked into this character who's been living in Tassin for a number of months. He is an outsider. He's what his background is in terms of academics and where he's gone travelling is up to you to decide during that first act. But he's already kind of built relationships and almost has preconceived opinions of people before going in. And I wasn't sure how I felt about that, because I would have really appreciated just a small part of the opening act where you have that initial, oh, here's the town, go and meet people, and your initial interaction with them kind of shapes how that relationship's going to at least start. And obviously you can kind of zigzag up and down with positives and negatives throughout the game with people during Pentiment. But I would have appreciated that. Is that just a Ronnie blower, or did you find it a bit, not startling, but frustrating being chucked in with all this background that you're not really aware of, that Andreas has had all these conversations with the town before, and then you're acting like, I don't know who this cunt is, so what we doing?
I mean, it was weird because they give you 80% of his background already and let you choose kind of 20%.
Yeah.
And I just always just thought it was a bit weird. It's kind of like, if you want to give me a character that has to do something and I'm playing through essentially a narrative, then give me the character. Like, yeah. I'm fine with not making him how I wanted to be, but I also struggle to know what... I sometimes in these sort of games, I find myself designing the character to what I think the game is catering for, and the environment and everything like that. And it just felt like a bit of an unnecessary step. If it's kind of like, this is the character, this is his background, he's an artist, he's from so-and-so, and he's got this degree or that, or whatever it is, it's kind of like, okay, fine. Like, that's who he is. I found it a bit unnecessary. I don't think the game would have kept people in long enough if there'd have been an additional kind of defining hour or two where you mapped out the character's background before it started getting into the meat of it. I think it lost too many people because, perfectly honest, it nearly lost me.
Oh yeah, like,
sort of 3 hours.
It's such a slow start. Like it is incredibly slow. I think the opening, I'm sure before I got his hooks into me, it was a good 3 hours.
Yeah,
most people just simply won't tolerate that and be like, on your bike.
I was so close to but I was like, I know that murder's coming. So if you didn't know that about this game, you would bin it, I think. Like, if you went in blind, you wouldn't wait for it. Like, it's only because I was like, I know there's something this event.
Here. Yeah.
There's something that's going to happen that it hasn't happened yet. It was the only... But I reckon even if it had been another hour, so if it had been 4 hours, I don't think I could have done it.
No.
I think I'd just have to go, no. So yeah, if you're talking about doing an hour or two of kind of character background work,
yeah,
you're talking 5 hours before you start really even getting into the meat of it, and that's going to be tricky, I think, for most people to digest.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people would have dropped it, but long before the murder happens, for sure. And I think obviously part of that, this is a game that requires a lot of reading.
Yeah.
A lot of reading. Now, I like some of the reading. I like the way the glossary system works.
It's not for those that don't read.
No, if you don't want to read or can't read, like some of these peasants that are in there that are struggling with the basics, then this ain't a game for you, because there is next to no voice acting. The reason I say next to no voice acting is because bizarrely, there's characters that do make noise, singing, for example, and I was like, right, that's interesting because it's impactful when you hear it, because you don't hear anything else. But then I was like, how much better could this game be with voice acting? Now, I know that comes with budget and time. It's artistically or creatively, they might not have wanted to do that. That's fine. But given you're asking a lot of the you're asking a lot of the audience to read as much as you've got here, and they also are very stingy on the music. Most of the noise you hear is just diegetic noise from the town. Like you go into that central part of the town, and that fucking cunt blacksmith's banging that metal. And if you're in there for 10 minutes of a conversation with a few people, that's all you can hear. Dung, 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 dung. You're like, Jesus, shut up. But other than that, it's fine. But I know
what you mean. It's not very atmospheric, is it?
It's not. It's not at all. And maybe that's the atmosphere they was trying to create, like this small, sort of sleepy town. But
yeah, but it just fades into dullness.
Yeah,
I think this is the problem I had with this game. Is that it's a lot of it feels like you're reading a book. Like there's nothing. Yeah. There's not a lot going on. There's, what did you? And I just want to skip to this because it's just annoyed me when I've thought about it. Like the actual having to move the character around.
What do you mean? What annoyed you?
It just felt unnecessary. Like it was just a little bit clunky, and
to
walk up the arrows and sort of go to. It's like, well, just let it be a point and click then, or some sort, or it snaps to it, and that just annoyed me a bit because I was like, and sometimes you have to like get the character in the right angle to
sort of hold
get the prompt
a little bit up and diagonally to make them go up on the fork or down the fork. It was irritating. It wasn't very. It was a bit scruffy.
I was just a bit. It just felt a bit unnecessary. Like it was in about 15 frames or something. It must have been as well. Like, and I was like, if you're going for this artsy style and this sort of like art book like thing with writing, like it's okay for it to be like pages. So you like the different parts of the town are different pages or something. So you press back to go. And it just would have sped up the process of going to talk to people. I don't know. I just felt like that if they wanted to go down that artsy route, then make it a bit more artistic. Like, I was sort of like, why am I? I didn't understand why I was like wandering around this village. that was like it was inconvenient. It wasn't like a bustling village most of the time.
Everyone just stands still.
A fucking graveyard, yeah.
Apart from that fuck on smashing the metal to pieces, he's the only one doing anything. But everyone else is just standing there, waiting for you to go and talk to them. So it's not like it's not like a bustling, like you said, like living town. Everyone stands still and waits for you to go and chat to them. Now the underhood of it does have a very complex kind of character structure, and there's a whole glossary of who's there, who they are, how they're related, and that's kind of, I guess, what they're trying to hook people on is the community aspect of this Tassin town. And all the people that come through it and live there and die there and whatnot, and kids growing up, whatever it might be. There's definitely a theme to it in that sense. But the way it's kind of packaged, I think you're maybe right. Maybe I would have preferred a point and click in hindsight because it would have been quicker. Just click on the person, I'll chat to it. It kind of wants to give you this agency because I think it's frightened of doing the point and click because it'd be seen as, just point and click. But mechanically, that would have worked better for me.
I think I was literally throughout the whole thing, I was like, oh, good, I've got to go back to the church, or I've got to go to like and it's like, good, I've got to go through
you got to run through all the screens.
And through all the screens, and I was like, that annoyed me having to go because there's a lot, as you say, there's a lot of back and forth in, and you're having to do that through this annoying like character I just didn't think that worked very well for me.
No, that's actually a good call out. I would actually think that a point and click would have served this a little bit better.
If you're doing all the text and it's all text and art based, it's kind of obvious to do it. I don't know why they've decided to do it in this sort of like movable character thing. I don't know. I just didn't like that. I just thought it would have been better. I mean, arguably though, it doesn't translate. A point and click doesn't typically translate as well for a console. No, so
we both played it on the Xbox console, didn't we? Series X.
But I don't know. I think that even if you just snap to it, I don't even think really moving it. I mean, I've got my controller in my hand now. Moving it around to like different parts isn't the worst. I think it's still been better than moving that bloody character model.
I'd just played it on PC if that was the case. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely we've come a long way from, that can be mapped to a controller and work. I noticed there were some errors, which I was quite surprised at, given the relative scope of the game. It's quite broad, it's quite deep in some aspects, but it is quite sort of condensed, isn't it? There's only a set number of people. There's a lot of them, and they run quite deep. But I wasn't expecting to see this. So there are situations where I would say things like, "Oh, I've never spoke to John. Like, who is he?" And I spoke to John 10 minutes ago. It was almost there was little inconsistencies like that. Someone saying, "Oh, I've gone to bed now. Good night." You go, "All right, see you later." And then you go upstairs and they're just standing there. I was like, what's going on here? Yeah. Having a massive blazing row with someone, like big fallout over huge, issues, which is kind of one of the game's strengths, is the issues that you kind of get snarled up in. And then you finish that conversation, and then just because I have to test it, I go and talk to them again. They're like, "How are you, Andreas?"
Yeah.
And it's like... Yeah. When that sort of stuff happened, I was a bit like, that's a bit disappointing, because it's killing that whole vibe I just had. I had this massive, completely understandable row with this person, and the very next moment you can just chat to them. They're like, "How are you doing?" It's like, In a text-based, I can see in a 3D voice acted world, but that might be tricky to implement. But when you got text, I kind of expected a little bit better. But there are things to like about the game, I think. It is a very much of a niche game. I think it always was set out to be that. The creator and the director, Josh Sawyer, said this is basically a passion project for me. I wanted to set it in this time period. Historically, I have no reason to doubt the accuracy of it. Like, if you're a history buff or someone interested in this time period or what's going on, there is, like I said, a glossary of terms in there. You'll learn a lot. I don't know if I retained much of it, but during the journey, you learn an awful lot about that kind of time and that area.
It's very specific.
It is.
Like, almost like, European, like mid-centuries, like 16th century, like history and politics and religion and stuff.
Europe was a fucking war zone for so many hundreds of years. Everything, kings and queens and all sorts of bollocks going on, wasn't there?
It's always going on. It's still going on now.
Yeah, well, it's
never going to stop.
No, it's true. So, look, if that interests people, that's definitely a boon. If you want to just chill out and play it, that's a bit of a boon as well. I just don't know if it quite came together for me in total, but I'll leave you to have the kind of final say, and then we'll take a look at what we're going to do with this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one, and I think it largely didn't hit the mark that I thought it might do, but it kept me in for 20 hours plus. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I'm still toying with it now. It's like, it's very much a feeling of what could have been, I think, for the game. I can forgive a lot of it. Some of it I can't. I didn't have to play it.
No.
I quite like history, though, and I quite liked some aspects of the game. But my question mark is around, is that core narrative strong enough to lead the game? And I'm still deciding.
Yeah, I mean, there are choice and consequences in the game as well, but that's only one kind of part of it. There is an overarching narrative that it wants to have you go through experience. So it's a tricky one. I mean, sometimes it felt great. Other times, but sometimes it was. I thought, oh, this is really interesting. And other times it was just too many long periods of just pedestrian, mundane, tasks, or what I was being asked to do, or what I had to do to kind of progress. And that really, the pacing was just completely off. I don't know if you could half the game's length. Maybe you can, but at times when I wanted to get on with it, I was thinking, this is dragging. The early part, I thought, this is dragging because I'm making it drag, because I'm, keep going back to this fucking forest to see if anyone's shown up, and they never do, because nothing really changes on that aspect. And but towards the back end, I was like, good lord, this is now starting to be a bit of a chore. But that's Pentiment, widely crapped on there, I'd say, if I was going to without listening back to it, I don't have that ability yet to instantly ingest what we've just said. So now we've got the real key decisions coming up. We've got the gaming gallery. Yeah. Does Pentiment, in your eyes, earn its place in there?
No. No, I don't think it does. And it feels slightly cruel, but I just... I played through it, but there was just even the moments where there was stuff going on, they didn't hit the highs that I'd expect it to. Yeah. And large parts of the game are boring, I think.
Yeah.
I think the game's too long. There were parts of it I enjoyed, and I was invested in the story of Andreas Mailer, but I just don't think it hit the marks that I wanted it to. From a narrative game, you can forgive all the other things about it if that narrative's strong enough, and I don't think it is strong enough for me to put it in my gallery. And I didn't particularly like some of the execution of the game either. So, yeah, not for me, I'm afraid.
No, that's fair enough. I think I'm going to follow suit there and not chuck it in either, which I'm quite shocked at because this had all the hallmarks of something that I would enjoy heavily, and it just never quite consistently managed to get to that point where I was, engaged with it and enjoying it. And at the end, I remember that when I got finished, I was like, thank fuck.
Yeah. It's never a good sign when you get to the end of a game and it's kind of a sense of relief.
No. That's why I play things through to completion, because sometimes I think, thank fuck, that's over. But then when I don't, I know obviously that I enjoyed that. Sometimes you think, I don't want that to end. Yeah. That's the lie. Every game I want to end, I must say that. Some people say, there's some games you just don't want to end. I'm like, no. I want to see what fucking happens and how this is wrapping up. Thank you. I want this off my plate. Yeah. I don't get that perspective. But this one, I was like, look, I don't know. I don't know what happened really, because this should have been an easy banker for me somewhere on the upper echelons in that gaming gallery. Now it's just going to be ushered out of the front door.
It's simple though, really. When you boil it down to it, it's too long and not engaging enough for a narrative-driven game. And on top of that, there's some execution faux pas, I think, that just make that whole journey a bit more irritating. I liked the style, I liked how it looked. I just don't think it just quite got to where I wanted it to. No. And it is borderline, to be fair. I could have easily have put it in bronze, I think, and just took the easy way and gone, bronze.
The dumping
in the books.
Bronze needs to have more respect put on its name.
This is the thing. And it's like, am I ever going to play it again? No way. Because I think you said to me, are you going to play it through again or something to try and see how your choices pick some different things? And I was just like, no, I can't do that again for another 20 plus hours to get an unsatisfying outcome. Like, I don't have an itch to do that.
According to How Long to Beat, average playtime, I had it here. I don't know what I've done here. I've been clicking around in this store and blown it. Main story 14 hours, main story plus extras 19 hours, all styles 17 hours.
No. I'm not having it. It doesn't. I don't know whether it's maybe me or you. I know Ronnie's slow. Next level, but I don't feel like. I was. But the game tries to make you be thorough, so I was trying to be thorough.
Well, it puts you in a situation where you've got to feel like you have to be.
Yeah. So I don't think it's now sitting. It's like pointing the finger at me, going, "Well, it wasn't meant to be." Well. You made me do that. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes, what you set up for me. Yeah, it had some high moments. I liked the idea of you never being able to do everything, and that kind of being in your control, and you're having just to follow your instinct or your nose, and thinking, well, this is the investigation path I'm going to go down, and at the end of it, I'm going to present my findings and see what happens. And they shift up the scenarios throughout the game, which is kind of interesting. But generally, just wasn't looking forward to playing it after the first sort of 5-7 hours. I was like, it's kind of wearing thin at this stage, and that unfortunately means Pentiment doesn't earn itself a way into the gaming gallery. If someone else comes along and plays it, they can go on their personal exhibition. They can have that sitting there proudly, but not on our watch. Pentiment fails to make the gaming gallery for either of us, which is not that common. Anyway, if you made it this far, we're going to close down Idle Game Chat for this edition, and we thank you for your time, and we're going to say ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.